Welcome back yet again to the Between the Levees podcast. I'm joined finally by Captain Kyle Pfenning. He is a heavy tow pilot on the Lower Miss. He's been a fair number of places, and he also runs a little YouTube channel called Mark Twained. I've had just about enough of him telling his followers that he's supposedly going to do this interview. So, at long last, Kyle Pfenning, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, Tim. What's up, man?
I know you've seen a few of these before. Tell me where you came from.
Yep. All right. Started off in Southwest Oklahoma. That's where I grew up. A little town called Hobart. Family started. It was a farm family there. German-Russian family that moved in before statehood. Family owned land there, and they just grew that farm through my great-grandfather and then my grandfather. And the original family land is still owned by my son now, but or the homestead place anyway. Grew up there working on farm. It was Southwest Oklahoma. It was, pretty much farming and oil field. That was about all there was out there. Did pretty good for myself, with the agriculture stuff, and kind of thought that would be the route I would go. As went through school, went to Oklahoma State for a little while, decided that I was going to be declared a major as chemical engineering. And that was just basically because it sounded good to my family, made everybody happy. It was something I enjoyed a little bit. And I knew a couple of guys that had graduated with that, actually petroleum engineering. And there was pretty good money to be made in that. I figured the chemical engineering would kind of, give me opportunities, but got a little bit burnt out on school. Took a semester or two off and went to work on the family farm. Found out at that point that the family farm was not going to operate with me and my cousin, my dad, and my uncle all wanting to be the chiefs. So I was a low man on the totem pole on that deal, and decided to go ahead and go back to school and get my degree at Oklahoma State. At this point, I'd been married, and my wife and I had our son. He was born in Stillwater when I was there in Stillwater for my time there. Anyway, I decided I was going to go back to school, and in the meantime, I'd enrolled, but it was going to be, or I can't remember if I got enrolled, but long and short, it was in a mid-semester, and it was going to be a few weeks before I was able to start back school. At that time, I'd done some sales. I'd done some other stuff at home. So I'd worked, I'd worked all the way through school. I managed a photo lab at Stillwater. So, I figured I'd go ahead and get my degree and go that route, and then find me a job and do something. And anyway, I had this time to kill, and I had buddies. There was Quint Harris. I was his younger brother's classmate. Quint was a little older than me. And he'd started working on the river. It had to have been right around 85, 86, somewhere in there. Long and short, same hometown. Seen him working out there. He drug a few other guys. I had probably about 5 or 6 buddies that had worked on the river at that time. Thought it was neat. Really didn't have any idea what it was all about, other than just they worked on the Mississippi River, Illinois rivers, where they mainly worked.
And before we get too far into your career and how all that began, tell me what it was like growing up in Southwest Oklahoma on a farm.
Oh, it was flatlands of Oklahoma. Our family, we had a big wheat farm. It was mainly wheat, and it was well over 3,000 acres of wheat. And then they raised cattle also. We had cattle and then layout ground. We had cotton and everything. It was primarily flat wheat ground is what it was. I grew up with that, working the ground, everything farming entails. And then as I got older and got into ag and stuff, I started doing showing my sheep and showing my cattle and showing pigs, but also the crops. We showed the crops, and had multiple first in state at the state fair. The Oklahoma Wheat Commission that was the big state wheat show where they actually made bread from you. You gave 15 pounds of your wheat, and they tested it for everything, all the contents, the nutrients, and then they would turn it into bread. Long and short, I won that contest a couple of times. The first time, one of the first or 5 or 10 people they would take first through fifth or first through 10th. I can't remember. It may have been 4-H and FFA a split, but it was a trip to Galveston to go see where they loaded the wheat on the ships and stuff. And I didn't get to go the first time I won the trip, but the second time when I won it again the next year, I was old enough to go and had the opportunity to go down there and see them loading wheat on the ships and barges and all that stuff. And it was just, that definitely was something that stuck in my head. And little did I realize it would come back around to that same sort of transportation, seeing the water. I remember seeing the ships and stuff and the barges, and it was real impressive. But yeah, that was kind of the background and a little bit how it would tie into the river. And as far as the familiarity, I do remember as I got a little bit older, I remember kind of looking up, well, how our wheat would get from the farm to market. And I knew, everything was by rail coming out of, the big stuff. It was hauled by truck, but the bulk stuff that they'd haul out of the elevators was by rail. So I started tracing that stuff back, and there was some stuff that loaded out of Catoosa. A lot of our stuff would rail down, but then it led me into, well, Catoosa and where that would go. And then so I kind of followed a little bit of the river stuff, and I thought it was neat that there was actually stuff that would come from our farms and areas, usually further on east of Oklahoma City, that, there were wheat farms out that way, that their stuff would go all the way down the Mississippi River to be transported to the ships and stuff. So I remember that. I do remember some of that stuff. But yeah, that was the early life. That would have been early life.
Anything else interesting to share about growing up out there, I guess through high school and into college?
It was it was one thing about it. It was, I do realize now, after getting out and away from that area, the work ethic, man, it was just something else. All my buddies that worked on the river, we were all known for just being hard workers, and I didn't think anything special of it till I work now, and there's definitely something about the work ethic and the ethic of, Western Oklahoma, or just Oklahomans in general. Yeah, there's you see different areas, and I don't want to say that one state or the other, because there's everybody's an individual, but overall there was a lot of us, especially guys working on the river. My buddies, actually, when I'd applied for the first time, going back to the in between, when the waiting to go back to school, when I started hearing about it, all these buddies that were going out there, Quint Harris led the way, but I got the phone number to WKN, to Johnny Wise, was the dispatcher there. And he sent me an application, but I didn't realize this till later on. I was told this, Johnny told me later on that pretty much most all my buddies that worked over there at WKN told him not to hire me, because I was this college boy that was just going to, ride a trip and then quit on them, and they, he wouldn't, don't waste my time. Don't waste their time on me. Those are my buddies, man. Those are my buddies. But that was how that started. After the college deal, I decided to put that on hold. I was just going to, it was not on hold. I had to wait on the semester. So here I am going to go work on the river. And there were quite a few, go through the list of names before me that went out there. There was probably about 7 or 8 guys from my hometown, specifically from Hobart, and that had gone out there. And at that time, Quint Harris was he was running captain. Captain Mark Hebensberger, who works at Ingram Barge Line now, who's captain on the E. Bronson Ingram. He had just been turned loose not very long in the wheelhouse, and there was a couple other guys that were working deck and fixing to move on up. So, I'd heard a lot about it, and I ran with these guys and stuff, but still didn't understand really what I was getting into, or what it was all about. I heard all the, they would tell me all the pranks that would get pulled. So I kind of had my eye out for that type of thing. But as far as having any expectations of what the job was about or what it entailed, I had no idea at all. I really hadn't even seen pictures of it. So anyway, I got hired on, and a lot of us Oklahoma guys that worked out for WKN Dispatch at the time, there were cheap flights from Oklahoma City to St. Louis, and they were crew changing 2 boats, Orleany and the Lois Ann, and sometimes a couple of the other boats they would have up that way. But those 2 boats specifically crew changed up on the Illinois River. They didn't come off the Illinois River. a lot of times they were up close to Chicago. Flights into Chicago were pretty high, but you could get, it was under $100 that they could fly us into St. Louis. They'd have the crew van from going from Paducah swing by and meet us and pick us up on the way, at St. Louis Airport, and then go on up. So it was kind of a regular thing for us Oklahoma guys to work that Illinois River. It was the logistics of it for the crew changes and stuff like that. So a lot of us ended up working together. We all kind of were up on that lowest San and Orleanian. At that time, there was a split with the National Marine boats. I can't remember. Quint and them started out with B&H with Buckle A. That was the connection. Let me go back. The connection to how Quint started out working on the river was his dad was in the Army with Buckle A. I had to call and ask the other day. I called Quint's brother and asked that the other day, but that was the connection. Buckle A went to the Army with this guy that ended up in Hobart that, started the Quint deal, and started him going out. Anyway, and that was the other thing too. Seeing Quentin with these driving, he was always had a new boat, new pickup, had a house. The price of living in Southwest Oklahoma isn't high, so he was making really good money. And that was another thing that really caught my eye. So I thought, well, go check it out. Well, here I am, hired on. First boat I was headed to was going to be the Daniel Webster, and they were up on the Illinois River. That was all I knew, somewhere around Pearl, Illinois, and that's where I ended up going.
Tell me about Deckhand onboarding and that first trip up there.
The first trip up, I flew into St. Louis. I was going to go, Johnny Wise told me I was going to go catch the Daniel Webster. And it wasn't a boat. I was familiar with some of the boat names, some of the guys that had from back home rode, but that one I didn't have any familiarity with it at all. Just knew I was going to fly into St. Louis, and then they were going to have this, basically it was a limo service, cab service that would run us out and meet the crew van and take us to it. Well, there was some deal with the crew van. I don't remember, but they had this limo service run me to Pearl, Illinois. And I was in contact. This is before cell phones were really prominent. So it was going payphone to payphone and finding out directions. This was before any, map. I think MapQuest may have been a thing, but it was just road maps having to figure out where we were going. And the guy from the airport didn't have any clue. So I was calling the office dispatcher and finding out how to get there. Well, I thought it was going to be this one, like a dock they were going to show up at. What I had pictured in my head was what a lot of people do. You're going to catch a boat. They're going to be at this one spot. I'm going to go this dock. That's where everything's done. I mean, I didn't have any idea that we caught this moving boat going up the Illinois River, which is what we did. And it was late. It was a windy, cold afternoon. And anyway, I'd walk down, it wasn't a nice boat ramp. It was this rocky, muddy ramp that I go down, and I've got my cowboy boots on, and I was all decked out, and didn't really have any idea of what like I said, I didn't know the conditions other than I had work clothes, but they were in my bag, and sitting there waiting, and I see this massive boat, barges and boat coming by, and then they launched the yawl, and he came over to the dock, or not the dock, to the boat ramp, but little old scrawny short guy with a work vest on and a guy with him. And I asked him, I said, hey man, I guess I'm your new hand or whatever. And first thing he asked me was, how much time you got, how much experience you got, working. And at the time, counting today. And then he just started cussing me right off the bat. Because cussing me and cussing the dispatcher for sending a green guy, because they were needing experience on that boat. Anyway, so that was my first experience with any of the deck crew. They wasn't happy to have me, and I thought everybody was going to be happy to have me, and they were not. I didn't have any experience. I was big, good shape, and all that, but just didn't have any towboat experience. So right then, that was what they were wanting. Got on the Daniel Webster. Made nice with the fellas, went up to the wheelhouse and met the captain. And that was an experience. Captain John David Arnold, he was my first captain. And I love that man. But at the time, at the time, he was very imposing figure, huge man, big man. And I've told folks, if you've ever heard Foghorn Leghorn talk on the cartoon Foghorn Leghorn, the big chicken, the way he talks, that a boy, that was the way he had that Tennessee drawl to him, but he was a genuine guy. I could tell that. And after a few watches, I pretty much proved myself as I was going to be a hard worker. I packed a set of rigging from the boat out to the head, so I showed I had the strength to do and I do whatever was asked of me. I just wasn't, obviously didn't know because I didn't need to pack it from the boat. Anyway, but I worked hard. I was a hard worker and I proved myself to John David Arnold enough within a few watches. I'd proved to him that I was gonna be a hard worker and do whatever was asked of me. I learned a lot from him. First, I think I've told folks before, when it started, when I really started thinking this might be something that, it was just a lot of hard work, which I didn't mind, but also saw the captain drive and watching John David drive. I was like, man, it just looked like something that would be fun to do. I mean, it really did. I know it was work. And at the time I didn't understand everything that went into learning something like that. To me at the time, it looked like it would be easy and it looked like something I wanted to do, and as the days went on, that's just really, I leaned into that. And obviously that was my first trip and I'm still doing it. So something sunk in on me on that. But
Tell me about running on the Illinois River, seeing that for the first time.
oh, the Illinois River was amazing. I remember we took the boats that I rode on early were primarily we'd run the Illinois River exclusively, and sometimes we wouldn't even make it below Peoria and we go up to Lamont and turn. So got to see a lot of that winter. I mean, winter time's no fun up there, summertime's no fun up there. It's just that it's hard, either cold or wet or or hot and not wet enough. So it was an experience. I remember I talking about that first trip I made, that really one of the things that got me was checking tow in the morning and right at sunlight, and we were coming across Peoria Lake. And I don't mean, it was just something about that sunrise and I can, it's vague in my head as to what specifics were that caught my eye, but I remember it was just amazing. It was amazing, and the solitude of walking out and a guy over there 35 foot away from me, but we were checking tow walking out there and how quiet it was. And it was just amazing. It was just something. And I grew up on a farm, like I said, Kim. So it really was, yeah, man, it was something about being outdoors and being able to see the outdoors all the time. That's something that keeps me coming back. I think it's something that I missed when I hadn't been out there, when I've taken time off or something. You notice the sunrises and sunsets. I think me and my son were talking about that. The flatlands of Oklahoma is where you can see sunrises and sunsets just like you can on the water. But that Peoria sunrise was just amazing. I remember, and yeah, I got hooked on it up there, man. It was hard work. We ran 6-man crews primarily up there, so you had 3 guys on watch at all times. So I really feel fortunate that I had that experience with experienced guys. I mean, I had guys that back in that time, you had guys that wasn't abnormal having retire off deck. I mean, you had career long deckhands and mates and stuff. Um, and I valued that experience. I did that, had that under my belt. But yeah, my early career was really short and quick because it wasn't. I can't remember. It hadn't been much more than a year or so that I'd been doing that, and I hurt myself, and I had some time off. And they called and checked on me. Luke Moore was the port captain at the time, and he called to check on me quite a bit, seeing if I was all right. And I don't remember what I was doing. I was helping with the books or something, with a local business, and I can't remember what specifics it was. But the conversation turned to, well, you can read and write. And I said, yeah. And at the time, I didn't realize that Johnny Wise was the crew dispatcher that had hired me, was looking to transition back out to the boat so he could get his license. So long and the short, me being off injured and combination of that and Johnny looking for somebody to replace him, that was the next progression of my career. I went from a deckhand to the office as a crew dispatcher. That period lasted gee, how long did we do that? I think I told Duke I'd do it for 1 year. And had I realized what craziness what that job was gonna entail, yeah, I would have ran. I'd have probably stayed on the boats for sure. But I think I made 2 years out of it. During that time, Tim, I started off with 8 boats working for Dewey for WKN. We were under the umbrella of National Marine. He operated the boats for National Marine. In that time period, the 2 years that I was in the office doing that, we were bought out, merged, whatever, with ACL, and we came under ACL umbrella. I think it was before that, all in the time frame of that. When that happened, we got the Stokes boats, which he was with National Marine, and whenever National Marine merger took place, he got rid of those boats. So we ended up we were operating 16 boats, from 8 to 16. And this was all through pilots agree and all the transitions of, this, that, and other. Anyway, after I went through all that, I decided I was done. I told Dewey I wanted to get back out to the boats and get my license. And because at that time, I didn't have enough deck time in, sea time in to get my license. It required, I can't remember what the certain amount of days were, but I didn't have them. And so I went back out. And when I went back out, and at the time when I left, I was been running lead man. I'd moved up pretty quick through the ranks, not necessarily from experience, but from need at the time. And but I excelled at it and picked it up pretty quick. So when I went back out on the boats, I was running mate, and ran mate on the Roy Mecklin, ran primarily the Ohio River at that point. Hadn't seen the lower much at all, maybe a little ways down south of Cairo, but I'd been Illinois River and then some of the upper, and like I said, the Ohio. When I was on the Roy Mecklin, that was where I was at for probably about, I guess, almost the remainder of my deck time was on the Roy Mecklin, running the Ohio all the way up to Pittsburgh and down to Cairo. Usually we turn around Paducah or Cairo. After that little stint, but there was a job on the Carol P came open where I was sent over there to go ride with Tommy Weeks. And now Tommy and I didn't get along with each other when I worked in the office. So I was shocked and surprised that they were going to have me over as a mate for him. Well, I don't think he asked for me or asked for anybody. It was just need be. He'd fired crew over there and they needed somebody, and I happened to be off and ready. So that was where I went. Tommy and I ended up being still, he's a lifelong friend, man. I love that man. Love him. But Tommy Weeks and Roy Barnes went over and rode with them on the Carol P at that point. I think I lacked a little bit getting my license, more so I was saving the money to go to school because I was going to go to the river school. To Davis Marine and get my license. Finished up my deck time over there, went to Davis Marine, got my license in Memphis, and came back. I think I rode, no, it was the very trip that I got my license. There was a couple of guys ahead of me in the steersman program, one of my buddies and guy I decked with. So I knew I was a little bit low on the totem pole as far as, I figured it was going to be a few months before I'd get steering time. And then when I was going back, it actually ended up to where I ended up going to the steersman program right then. Luke Moore, the port captain, said, "You're going to steersman. You got your license with you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "We're going to start you steering this trip." And a buddy of mine that was my lead man was going to be promoted to mate. So anyway, long and the short of that lasted, me and Tommy lasted about 2 weeks before he put me off. He put me off the boat my first time. He had to ask for a steersman. I wasn't ready to be a steersman at that point. I was still trying to run the deck from the wheelhouse. So that experiment lasted 2 weeks. I got put up my first boat, and my first stint as a steersman lasted 2 weeks. So anyway, I figured at that point that I was, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I'd go work in a fleet tug. somewhere or harbor service, but Dewey told me, come on back to the office. Well, he had a plan, but I didn't know at the time. He said, come on back to the office. I've got another boat to put you on. And that's when I got on the Ron Shankin. And that's where I started doing my steering. That was, that would have been, I got my license in 99. That was in 99 when I started doing my steering over there, with Captain Mike Earler and Dennis Mize. And, yeah, I started, that's where I got all my steering time. Well, I say all of it. I got a little bit of time here and there on a couple of other boats, but primarily it was on there with Dennis and Mike Early. And I've always told folks, Captain Mike was by the book. I had to do everything perfect. Just he wanted, no deviating from exactly what he told me. And Dennis was a little bit more he was kind of figure it out, on my own type deal. So I've always told folks the two guys that couldn't have been more perfect, because I had Cap Mike showing me how to run the channel spans of bridges, and Cap Dennis was showing me how to run the alternate spans. So I learned, I got that. It was a perfect mix. At the time, I didn't realize how perfect it was, but yeah, I got that experience, my steering, and then got turned loose fairly quickly. Actually, probably too quickly, but I got turned loose. I think it was within 8 months. I was running from basically Cairo, St. Louis, Cairo down to Tiger. That was pretty much our primary run. And we had a lot of those boats in a liquid tow. So it was tows that were set up for a 15 barge tow to run all the way up to Ohio. And so we'd have 15 loaded barges northbound out of Tiger, and then mixed tows coming down. So I had experience with up to 20 and 25 out of St. Louis with a 5600. And I could do that on a regular basis. I felt comfortable running about anywhere, just because I was young and dumb, and that's the way it went. But yeah, that was how it got started in the wheelhouse. That would have been in 99.
What's the prettiest place you've ever run?
The prettiest place. I've heard folks talk about that. It still hasn't changed for me. It's downbound Cincinnati in the morning, southbound, right at the if you've got that morning watch and catching sunrise, where the sun's at your back and you're seeing the bridges, everything lit up. That still has to be. And that's, I mean, I love all the city views, all the city fronts, and the countrysides and this and that and other. But still, it's awesome. It's really awesome to be coming through the bridges. You've got the ballpark, and the football stadium and all that on this side as you make that turn. But when you've got the sun to your back and you're seeing the lights of the city, or everything lit up, it's still the lights of the city are still on, but the sun coming up. That's about the most amazing view I think I've ever seen. Second to that would be I think it's Lock 11 pool. No, Lock 12 pool. It's Lock 12 pool on the upper Mississippi River, because you got sandy beaches, and there's also ski slopes where they've got the ski lifts on that side. So wintertime, I always thought that was neat, where you had a ski resort. Obviously not at the same time. I've seen it in the summertime when it was just a grassy hill, but that's just beautiful. That whole stretch there below Dubuque is just, that whole area up there is beautiful. But I think that Lock 12 pool or Cincinnati, those two are my two favorites, I bet.
All right, so let's backtrack. You're cut loose. You're running your own boat. You're in a 5600 running up and down to a.
No, that was the deal. They got me turned loose running that lower Mississippi River, and I'm gonna call myself a lower Mississippi River pilot and all this, that, and other. Luke Moore calls and said they're gonna turn me loose. I get turned loose, and they send me up to the upper end of the Ohio, which, oh my gosh, I mean, that was something else. I thought, I was used to running in current, and it was just it was dead water up there. I mean, dead water. It's a locking river, so at that time, and I can't remember the exact time of year, but there was no current. And that was a challenge in itself, because I hadn't dealt with that. And we did our own tow work up at Natrum and all that stuff. And yeah, I flipped and flopped out in the middle of the river one night, I think, until the captain finally came up and hollered at me and, yeah, told me what I needed to do. But that would have been Captain George Packish, and that was the first captain that I actually stood my own watch with him. And he was standing. He was the captain. I was the pilot. First time turned loose after my steersman program was Captain George Packish, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Polish background, and he grew up uh, all in that upper Ohio River area, worked all different jobs on Ohio up there. But his first job decking was on, and I wish I could remember the name of it. I had it at the top of my head. It's an old steamboat that's on display at the Marietta River Museum they have. That was the first boat he decked on. So that's how far he went back. I always got a kick out of that my connection to that era going that far back. But Captain George was towards the end of his career and as good as gold. He wasn't he wasn't well read, but he was a very smart man. He was a very smart man. Um, I learned a lot from George. I learned a lot that unexpected things. I mean, he taught me a lot. He taught me how to, he was really patient with me being a young pilot. He was towards the end of his career, but there was a lot of things that he would tell me that, about if I get worried about this, that, or the other. He knew the areas of the river that were going to catch me, and he could give me just a little quick, without you know too long, he could give me advice on what I needed to do. And I valued that so much, man. The things I learned from Captain George, but also just his stories and this, that, and the other. But Captain George was he was George Packish. That was the first captain I rode with. Stayed over there on that Ohio after I dealt with and learned it, having not steered it at all and barely decked on that upper end. I'd been up there a few times, but got that Ohio down, felt comfortable running on it. And then there was an opportunity where a lower boat came open. And so I transferred over to it and started riding. I think it was with Roy Barnes. I think, yeah, or Captain Roy. Anyway, that's where I got back on the 5600s where those boats would run everywhere and anywhere. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. My end goal was to be able to run anywhere on any size. And I'd always seen when I worked in the office, some of these hotshot trip pilots that we hired. And at the time, the trip pilots that we had were usually either retired or semi-retired guys that were, could go anywhere. It didn't matter what boat we had or where or anything like that. And I do remember they made a little extra money. Remember that part too. But I always thought it was neat. You could call on these guys. We had different guys that just ran specific rivers. They didn't feel comfortable running it. I worked in the office enough where I heard heard guys throw a fit if their boat was going to turn south of Cairo or north of Cairo. If they were lower guys or upper or Ohio. And I just always wanted to be a guy that wasn't a worry. These trip guys, man, they could go anywhere. So getting back on the 5600, getting off just primarily the Ohio River, yeah, it got me back to moving around, going down south. We were running down to the Gulf then. So I got to see, that stretch, get it all back fresh in my mind. I think I went ahead and yeah, I didn't have anybody post me back up. I was familiar with that lower enough where I was good to go. So I ran it and opportunity came up with the upper. There was opportunity to go run it. And man, back in the day, I mean, I hear guys now, well, they'll get not just now, it's just different times they've had. Well, they'll get a posting pilot. They'll pay somebody to post a guy, a well-experienced running pilot to run up somewhere. Our posting pilot was Tom Farrington. I think it was his last name. No, Tom Flowers. Sorry about that. Tom Flowers. Captain Tom was the Illinois River pilot. Me and the captain that were going to run the upper had never been up there. And so he got on to post us. And Tom didn't do anything but threw his chart at us. He had his old chart. He hadn't been up there in years. And so he told us to, if we had any problems, he'd be in the officers' lounges where the TV was at the time. So that was basically a trial by fire. We had a very experienced mate and crew on there. Dewey had the most experienced mate that we had over there at the time for running that upper. And those guys, I think I heard one of your other podcasts, I think it may have been Beavers. One of them was talking about that one of your caps about running different areas and having but having an experienced mate that just talked him into the lock and told him what to do. That's yeah. I had mates and crew that could do that. They had enough experience where he told me exactly what I'd be looking at, and that man called me from that corner of that barge, telling me, "All right, you need to give it, little." He was telling me which way to. He was not only giving me distances, he was telling if I need to slow down, come ahead, steer on over here. I mean, he literally talked me into those locks, and this was before they were running a lot of tugs up there, so that was something. And checking the head in and all that. Um, it's much safer the way they do it now with the tugs. That's something, one of the biggest improvements they made. That's so dangerous. But anyway, that's how I learned that upper was with a captain's chart that had it all marked up good. And I have a old light list. I still have those papers that show me how to get up and down that river. I mean, just more. I don't keep them to look at. I just have that. I still have them. And those old mates, man, those old experienced mates. That's what became. I become experienced up there. But yeah, that's how I got my background in running everywhere. Pretty much, I transferred over there. Did that. Well, decided I really wanted to get on the bigger boats, and anything bigger than what we had was at Marquette. So I think it was 02, 03 ish, somewhere around in there. I decided to go to work at Marquette and spread my wings at the time. It was what I thought. I wanted to get on their bigger boats, and they did. I got over there quick, and Captain Eric Canfield was over there, and we'd both had the same. We'd both steered under the same guy, kind of had the same background as far as our progression to the wheelhouse, and so that, along with Quint Harris vouching for me, making a call and vouching for me. I went to work at Marquette, and they posted me up on the bigger boats over there. And I rode over there with quite a few different people, quite a few different boats. But Captain Bill Wenders and Captain Henry Hornsby is who they did my check ride with me. And I think I rode a little bit with Captain Bill and bounced around a little bit over there for a few years before I decided I was done with the river. Once I got to the big boats and done that, I'd done it. Oil field was paying pretty good about that time. And so, yeah, I took about 5 years off and went worked oil field.
Tell me about that experience.
It was a little bit, me working the oil field that's simplifying a little bit too much. At the time, my wife was sick. She'd had leukemia and MS. So being close to home and working oil field was something that it just at the time that was my fit. And so I did that. Plus, my son was getting high school age, so I want to be there for him and stuff. So, worked oil field. It was crazy, fast, wildlife. I worked a sales job, so I had a pickup and drove around Texas Panhandle and Western Oklahoma, and did that for a few years until, like most times, the oil field slows and dries up, and it's not there. That's when I did realize right then that the consistency of the river, I mean, it's got definitely, we have ebbs and flows, but the consistency that job's going to always be there was something I really did value after working oil field and doing that. Also, I started hearing what trip rates were paying. I had buddies working out there, and they were saying what trip rates were paying. So I figured it was time for me to get back out there. And yeah, that's what I did. It was strange though. I'd let my license lapse. So I'd actually, I found out the hard way. I was an example. I remember they made fun of me when I was going through the whole process. Everybody, yeah, he's testing the second time. They changed the licensing up, Tim. I'd had a second class operator, and I was so stubborn, I never upgraded to first class because it was going to cost me some. I remember Cecil Duncan was my port captain and kept telling me I need to get that done. And I wasn't where I had a second class operator license and ran front watch on a 35 barge tow on Lower Mississippi River with a second class operator and I had 100-ton masters because I remember Jimbo told me to get that license. It was just a second deck general to take. And if I ever wanted to run a harbor tug or anything like that, I'd have it. But I had a second class operator license, and rode the biggest boats that there were at the time on the lower Mississippi River, and ran front watch. So I don't know. I didn't think I needed the piece of paper if I could actually do the work and get hired for it. Anyway, long and short, after being off 5 years, they did the licensing. That's when they did everything from, they got away with the operator's license, and now they have the steersman's, pilot's, a master's license. When I was filling out all the application, everything, the Coast Guard, they didn't really know what they were going to do with me. They okayed me to test, but they didn't know what type of license. I was told I would probably have to start out as a steersman's license and progress through. So I went ahead, and after I passed, it was fairly quick process of me getting my test and passing it. But when they saw my service letters and what I'd done at the time, then they went ahead and issued my master's license to me. Thankfully, I didn't have to go through the steps. But then after having my license, I figured I'd just get hired like that, and because I had connections in the industry. But everybody was, they were a little leery of me after being off for 5 years. So I got hold, and I kind of wanted a trip. I was just wanting to do trip work at that time. And I got hold of a guy named James Scott. Somebody gave me his number, and it was this crazy story. The first time I ever took 35 barges south on my own, it was on the Randy Eckstein, and I got off at New Orleans. After I got down there south, I got off the boat in New Orleans, and I was waiting to catch a flight out of New Orleans. And the combination testosterone, adrenaline, I don't know. Guys that have done it, they understand you just really pumped up, really all about a lot of ego, all that good stuff that makes a good heavy tow pilot to get it down, the confidence and stuff that gets it down. We'll get off a boat and put that anywhere else, and it just doesn't mix. It's not a good mix. Well, I was at an airport bar and telling all about probably everybody in there what a river god I was. I'm sure I was pretty well pumped up and throw alcohol on top of all the other stuff I said. And anyway, long and short, there was a guy that was there he was a young Marquette pilot, canal pilot, just got hired on the Gulf Division with Marquette. I was one of this, had just brought this big tow down. And long and short, me and him had this conversation that I barely remember. Over 5+ years later, when I'm looking for a job, he started this trip work stuff where he was trying to get recruit pilots so that he could, he had connections, office and pilots, and he was going to be the go-between and be he was going to be a trip agent. That's what he was going to be. So somebody gave me his number, and I called him, and he kind of was giving me the blow off like everybody else. We hadn't drove a boat in 5 years type thing. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what's your name and number? And I told him my name. When he heard the name Kyle Pfenning, he said, the Kyle Pfenning. And I knew I was in when he said the Kyle Pfenning, but it was James Scott, this young Marquette pilot that I'd talked all this noise to 5 years prior. And he was impressed with me enough where he had me on a boat within 2 or 3 days. But with all that, I remember him telling me, now if the owner asks, you've been on the boats and you've done all the BS that he told Dean at Steel City. That's whose boat I went and got on the Mary Lynn. Had never run the Arkansas River, had never seen it other than when I was a little kid, and I'd seen it water skiing, never seen it. And my first trip after 5 years off the boats was 2 trips up and down the Arkansas River. And we were hauling fertilizer to Friars Point, but we made 2 round trips up and down that river. The numbers on it, it doesn't sound right, but we made 72 locks in 34 days. And if you add up all the 18 locks up and down 4 times, and then we double tripped on the upper end. So it was something 70 some odd locks in 34 days. Long and short, I got my boat handling back on point real quick, Tim, with all that, making those locks and stuff and all that close handling. And then some of the lower, so everything was, back at me real quick. And I ended up tripping pretty regular for Steel City for quite a few years after that. But yeah, that was me. That's how I got back into it, and hadn't looked back since. Man, I'm still running boats.
What happened next for you in your career?
Well, I did the tripping. I did the tripping for a while, and then finally I've been tripping. uh I got into the smaller boats, and I'd got into doing they had me posting up a lot of the Satoon boats. um when they first started, when they started building, all those Satoon boats started coming out, and they had a bunch of these coon asses going all the way up to West Virginia that had never been north of Baton Rouge. So I got to posting a lot of those guys, and really most of it was just babysitting them new equipment. I think I was just insurance uh, for some of them, because it really wasn't much to do. Most of those guys were excellent wheelmen. They just hadn't seen the area, wasn't familiar with it, and they were coon asses, so they're they wasn't scared of it. It didn't freak them out. They most of the time, I just had to stay hid from them because they was upset that I was on there to begin with. They didn't need they didn't need me on there, so. Yeah, it was a lot of dead time. But after doing that for a while, and then really, I'd kind of done a lot of tripping on the unit tows and stuff. I was ready to get back on the dry cargo, the bigger tows. I mean, to be honest, Tim, it was better money, and it was just really that was my roots, and I wanted to get back to that. So somebody gave me Charles Straight's number, and actually, it was yeah. I called Charles. I think it was Charles or Ronnie. Anyway, Ronnie Griffin's his port captain, and that's who I got hold of. And I tripped for them. I told Ronnie I wouldn't take a regular job for him. I wouldn't take a regular job. He said, "That's fine. Well, whatever you want to do, man." So after I think I worked for him for like 4 years, steady, didn't work for anybody else. I just tripped, but only for them. Finally, I just got tired of paying my own insurance and swapped over. And folks that don't know, the trip wages, and when I was in the office and I saw these guys making more money, as trip, you just don't get paid, without the benefits. And so it's basically you get paid for what you would have gotten benefits. And it's mainly a wash either way. I mean, it didn't make much difference one way or the other. It was just less paperwork for insurance to go full time. And that's who I've been with for, I don't know, I've been with them for a few years now, 6 or 8 years maybe.
Are there any waterways you've not been on?
I don't go. I'm not an east-west pilot. I'm not an east-west. I don't do the canals. I don't do none of that. Yeah, man, I've run and the Tennessee. I've just run it above the Kentucky lock. But I've run to. Well, that's the thing. That was my first. When I first got turned loose, I hadn't been turned loose 6 months, but I was bringing 25 out of St. Louis to the Gulf. I thought that was pretty impressive, and I'd pretty much seen it all. And I remember telling 6 months turned loose, and I remember telling Dave Dewey that I needed topped out because I was posted up on all rivers. I'd run to Pittsburgh, I'd run to St. Paul, run to Chicago, I'd run everywhere. And I still remember what he told me. He said, "You're not you're not posted. You just seen a lot of shit once." That's what he said. But no, man, I don't. I mean, I feel well posted on the upper to St. Paul. The Ohio, I'm rusty. It's been a while, but I can make trips all the way up there. And like I said, the upper up above Kentucky. I mean, the Tennessee River. Really, that's probably one that's just not on my list that I really would like to run. But at this point, it's not. I'm not going to put it on bucket list. I mean, if I don't ever run it, it's okay. But if the opportunity arises and the price is right, I would. You know how that is.
What's the biggest tow you've been behind?
The biggest tow was 63. We had 63 empties on the Ray A. I was on the Ray A. Eckstein over there. Actually, that was when I was doing my check ride over there on the Ray A. And it was a combined tow with the Randy. The Randy's was down on one engine, and we each had one of us had a little over 30, and it was a combined tow, so it was 2 boats pushing, but still nonetheless impressive. And then southbound probably 35 or 40. I think I've taken 40 a couple of times. Yeah. And then my most impressive though was, to be honest, Tim, was my first trip, because I've yet to see, I know they do it, but it's not something that I've seen since or before, just because I hadn't seen it. But we were bringing 25 out of Evansville, 25 barges, and we had an overage tug come get them off above John T. Myers and above Smithland. But I never seen it. I mean, I'm serious. That was my first trip turned loose. And that was still, I tell folks I brought 25 from Evansville in Ohio. So that's my claim to fame. That's it.
Well, I've been at the sticks behind, one or two. I did 8 one time, just training with pilots while I was up at in fleet dispatch. So I mean, I vaguely know what that's like. Tell me about being behind 63.
See, at 63, I mean, I won't just go there. I'll go just a 30, 35 barge tow. I've looked across 25, but there's something that does flip. I mean, there is something because, especially when I've been off a little bit and you look out across it, I don't think, I mean, it's not really, it to exude confidence and all that. And we are borderline arrogant anyway, most river pilots and particularly lower pilots. But it's huge, it's massive. And for me, I really do like that I get that it still does give me, especially like I said, if I've been off a few days and step up to the wheelhouse and you look out across 35 barges, if it doesn't make I don't know, it still gets me a little bit. But that's the thing. I mean, I've talked to people about it. It's almost learn how to suppress that fear and just do the job. And you learn how to do that enough to where it just becomes the confidence. And when I say scared, it's a different, like it's not like, oh, it's not one of those, but it is definitely, it's something that you step across it, and it's to feel that responsibility on your shoulders is something. I mean, it just is, but it's I mean, I'm impressed when I see guys go by. I videotape a lot of stuff and I see guys go by. That's what, yeah, I'm impressed with it. I mean, I've said it before. I tell folks, I'm a very big fan of my peers and what they do. Big boat. Now you want to go big boat impressive. You can go big boat, but I've been put on a boat, a little tug up in the port of Catoosa, and had everybody looking at me, and these coon asses were on there with me, and they all knew how to handle this boat better. But I had to face up and unface is all I had to do. And I still remember them telling me, let's see what this big boy, giving me a hard time because I bragged about what size tows I'd brought down. Let's see what you can do at one boat. You know what I'm saying? There's levels of that stuff. It's all what your opportunities, where you've been and who's taught you. I mean, that's a big thing on the river stuff.
Well, switching gears, of course. Tell me about your family.
My family, son, he works oil field. He's an oil field guy. He runs a shop and does that. He's my son's 30. My daughter's 23, 30. Yeah, man, I'll mess those ages up, but close enough. My daughter, she got her BSN in nursing, and so she does full-time nursing. She works in a cancer research facility, and like I say, my son works oil field. And it just blessed me with a granddaughter back in January 6th. So we got a little granddaughter, and my grandson is Sam's 3 now. Yeah, 3-year-old grandson. So those are my kids. And my daughter has a fiance. She'll be married, I think, in November. She'll be getting married. So both of them grown and married and doing great, man. My wife of about 3 years now is she's a special ed teacher. She's director of special ed for the junior high in Moore, Oklahoma. That's what she does. So I found a woman that's her job, is to have patients dealing with special ed kids all day. So, she comes home and deals with me, and it just, it's a walk, makes her job easy after dealing with me all evening, all weekend. But she's a very patient woman, and that's what towboaters need. Very patient women in our lives.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So, looking over your shoulder there, I see plenty of books. Tell me, do you have a favorite genre, favorite author, favorite title?
Man, Mark Twain. That's where I got it. And that's the other thing. My channel, my YouTube channel is Mark Twain, and it is confusing because I've had people even here call Mark. That's my name. Man, how I got Mark Twain was when I was a steersman with WKN. I was a steersman coming down the river, and I had read it before, but I had forgot. Was Life on the Mississippi River by Mark Twain. And I got to read, I think there's about 3 chapters in there early in the book where it's Twain was describing his trip down the river when he was a steersman, with Horace Bixby, with Captain Bixby. And it's description, and I was reading those chapters as I was coming down the river. I kept my reading in line with the watches as we were seeing those areas of the river, and that was really, I think it was actually a email address. I was needing to come up for a name for an email, or I was getting a new email, and I thought, well, I just got through reading Twain. We'd come down south, so I figured it was Mark Twain was what I'd feeling. So I put that. That kind of stuck with me, and used it as a handle for my channel.
Speaking of your channel, tell me how that thing developed. I know it started out, you said, I think your kids playing sports, and then
I started my YouTube channel, Tim, doing it was just family. It was so I could, family. It was, I had my channel in 07, I think was when I first started, and YouTube hadn't been out, but YouTube as a platform in itself, but I could upload videos to it, and then my family could see them. I wasn't really looking for stuff to put out to the world. It was just, so family that lived in other, everybody could see that. And it started from that. And then when I started working on the river, I started putting those videos as the suggestion from a friend of mine, actually. But it was the technology was just, it was hard to do. It took forever. You had to have really good connections, usually wired connections at the time to do that. And so I started doing that. And up until the time that I think I'd started getting better equipment, I don't even remember what equipment I recorded with, but my most viewed video was saving the Miss Francis there in St. Louis Harbor. Excuse me. And but I had a video of that. What had happened was Donnie LeBove was the captain on there, and we were at the dock right across from Anchor Fleet. And I remember waking up on the floor because we bumped something, and we weren't supposed to be moving. And long and short, I go up to the wheelhouse, and Donnie was up there saving the Miss Francis, pulling it off. They downstreaming on an Anchor Fleet. And I remember I had just gotten up and asking. Donnie was one of those guys that just really worked good alone. But where I was, I had to run. I ran back down to get something, either my glasses or something. Anyway, I went in the bathroom, which overlooked the same view out, across the head deck. And Donnie was within earshot. Me and him, I could hear him, he could hear me. And I just started recording what was going on my phone. And after everything was okay and we were all good, they had the Coast Guard. We had like 5 or 6 Coast Guard in the wheelhouse, the investigators after their investigation, everything, what happened and all this. And it was basically we had to downstreamed and pulled a tug that was hung up on an anchor chain on an Anchor Fleet there in St. Louis Harbor in extreme high water. The water was really swift. And the anchor chain's what kept him from flipping all the way under and killing them folks. But he got hung up on that anchor chain. All the guys got off the tug. And at that point, we were just trying to get a line on the tug to pull it off. And that's what we ended up doing. But I caught it all on video. And I, with no intentions of posting anything like that at all. It was something that was crazy. And at the time I videotaped it. And when we had Coast Guard and all them on doing the investigation, there was also the owner Osage and one of our company representatives. I think it may have been Ted Waxler, who I was tripping for at the time, Waxler. They were all in the wheelhouse. And Donnie said, hey, show them that video. And so I'm showing 1 or 2 of the Coast Guard guys this video. They all wanted it, they wanted it for whatever they were going to use it for. And the owners, nobody was going to get in trouble. It was all, they just wanted to see the video. And I had like 5 people wanting the video in the wheelhouse. And at the time it was, this would have been probably 2010, 2011. It uploads, it would have been real slow. It took forever to upload that. And to each individual person. So I just told them I'll put it on my YouTube channel. If that's cool, then y'all have access to it. And once I had the okay from everybody involved, permission basically from owners and Coast Guard, where it wasn't going to be an issue for me to have it up, I put it up, and then it just took off from there. I put that up, but then I started shooting pictures of sunsets and sunrises, the pretty views we have, Tim. I mean, that was really what it started from. And this was before YouTube was any ad revenue or anything like that. It was just to have them up. Then I started having had a mate take a picture of me making it down through Vicksburg Bridge with me, and we had a wheelhouse full, and me and the pilot were just talking about the bridge and going through. And just with the encouragement and stuff like that, I'd get young guys, young pilots telling me that they like that. So I would try to catch as much as that stuff as I could, catching coming through Fort Madison Bridge, coming through Memphis bridges and stuff like that, trying to, different areas. I tried to catch them. And then it became asking, people that didn't work on the river started seeing my videos and stuff. So yeah, it was just kind of a natural progression. Early on though, there was kickback for sure for posting anything on there, because when I came from an era where a lot of that bar books and your information was very protected, it wasn't shared like it is now. That was your guarantee that you could work for somebody. You had that knowledge that nobody else had. And I understand the reasoning behind it and the reason it was kind of secretive back then, but the openness and the sharing information is just much better. It keeps everybody safer. I mean, it's better to pass on information. Plus, I always looked at it as that wasn't, I didn't discover that, came from somebody else anyway. That knowledge was passed on from somebody to them. So anyway, with my YouTube channel, it's a little of that, and it's a little just trying to. I mean, I like what I do, man, and the main reason I do it is because of the, some of the views, some of the things we see. I mean, I get to see areas of the country that nobody has any idea about, and I'm impressed with boats too. So big boats and pretty scenery, Tim. That's what it's all about.
All right. Well, Kat, what do you think about this maritime throwdown program?
I'm very impressed with it. That's something that when they first started it out, I didn't think it would really catch on. I mean, I was like, man, how are they going the logistics of it? Because it is, you have, I still don't, it's something that's great. It instills, guys wanting to learn that stuff. There's a value, it's just not, guys are shooting for it, and it is good. It's something that they've set up that it's a skills test. And man, that's something that, I know I've said myself, and you hear a lot of the wheelmen say that that's kind of lacking, the skills and passing down of that knowledge. Well, this is something that, it gives it value, other than just that's your job. It's something to shoot for. And also, getting better at it. I've seen guys, one thing about it, I had not seen guys doing, for a long time that I remember. We used to do it, and we used to do it for cash, was throwing lines for cash, stand out on the deck, and we do that, to sharpen your skills. They got away from that a little bit for, I don't know why the training and practice, it seemed like you didn't see as many guys doing it. But since that maritime throwdowns come into existence, man, it's just, you see guys working on skills. I mean, working on the skills, and it's just, it's something else that, it brings light to our industry and gives up people that may not have an idea what it is. They do a lot of the advertising and stuff they do. It brings attention to what we do on the river. And I'm all about it, man. I'm all about it.
And finally, what do you think about my little project?
I think, Tim, what you're doing, man, and just me, I just for the time that me and you got to know each other, watching the guys that you get. Number one, the quality of guys that you've gotten up until me, it started dipping right there. But some of your quality of guys, uh, you've got some great men that's very interesting to listen to. The stories to be told, a lot of people don't get to hear a lot about this industry. It really, it's almost secretive at times, it seemed like, but anything that shines a light on it. Like I said, man, I'm a fan. I mean, I started watching a couple of your captain interviews and hearing their different stories, hearing the similarities is what got me. We come from these totally different backgrounds, or went to work for a totally different company, but to hear the similarities, the one that really, I mean, it got me the other day was listening to the captain that was talking about the camaraderie of the crew, the crew, and how these river people come together. And
Yep.
I've seen it, man. I've seen office people. I've seen river folk, all of them, the connection to the river. There's something there. There's a camaraderie to it, and it's special. It is special. And you're capturing that, man. You're getting that vibe. I love that you're capturing this from guys. And man, I've told you what you're doing, dude. It's going to catch on. It's already catching on. I enjoy seeing it. I enjoy seeing and hearing other people's stories. Yeah, it's just neat, Tim. It's neat, and you do good. You're a good talker. You're a good listener, and yeah, man, this is really neat. It's a really neat project.
I appreciate that. Do you have any final message for the industry? Any from new deckhands all the way up?
Oh man, I mean, I think it was one of your other guys too that was saying, the opportunities that this industry offers, man. It's just, I don't think people realize, number one is what it takes to keep this industry running. The infrastructure, the improvements that need to be made. The upper Mississippi River, those locks all need to be replaced up there. But you're shining a light on it so that I think some of that stuff is going to be realized. People paying attention to the river and what we do. I mean, this low water that we had and how it slowed things down and how that became a national priority. I mean, that's what it is. It's always been a national priority to me. I think what you're doing is going to shine a light on that, Tim, and I think it's cool.
Well, I do hope so, and I appreciate the vote of confidence, man. Looks like we finally did it. Finally got this on video.
Dude, I'm gonna call and cuss you. I'm gonna call and cuss you if this don't go through.
I'll keep you posted on progress.
Thanks, Tim.